Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to Three Men Talking Fantasy Football. I am here with Mr. Anthony Perez and Mr. Thomas Lang. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing
Doing
good.
well.
Good. Are we
Doing
ready to
well.
roll for
I'm gonna
Week 12 transactions?
let's keep the fantasy wins rolling.
Yes, sir. Let's help out our community.
Yeah, well, we have quite a lot to talk about. Let's jump right in. We can probably jump right into some running backs. Let's start with let's start out already. I already know where there's going to be a disagreement. So let's start in the probably owned category. If for some miracle Tyrone Tracy is still available in your league, pick him right up. He's at right around 70-80% across multiple leagues. Um, Bucky Irving is, in my opinion, the exact same category. He has standalone value beyond just being the second quote unquote running back in Tampa Bay. But let's jump into a disagreement. I'm of the opinion that I don't care how bad the game was for Rico Suave, our favorite Dallas Cowboys running back last week, and it was bad. But for being the starting running back on an NFL team, he has to be rostered. If you guys disagree, go ahead. Now's the time.
I,
Yeah, you
I, I
can
don't
roster.
yeah, I don't disagree that he shouldn't be rostered. It's a different disagreement now if he should be playing. If you would ask me, is he going to start every week? No, we can have a debate about that. But as far as a starting running back, yeah, all starting running backs should be rostered by this point. I agree with that.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, yeah, again, he should be rostered, but he's going to be rostered on the bottom feeder. He's never gonna play, and if he for some reason touches the field, um, you know, I don't think you guys are listening to the conversations for the past 2-3 weeks. So let's get be in a better position to be successful on our fantasy rosters and not have to dwell on having Rico Suave in our lineups.
I like the idea, considering some of the players that I've seen people trotting out in the running backs week in or week out. I mean, maybe taking a shot on McNichols or something. I feel like you're probably better off going with a starting running back for an NFL team. So yeah, but I'm mostly of the agreement. It's not like I'd be excited to play him, but
Well, I
it is.
mean,
I mean,
I'll be honest. I'll be honest with you. I mean, again, piggybacking off of last week's conversation, yes, Alexander Madison didn't have a tremendous week last week because there was a lot of movement when it comes down to Zamir White and Amir Abdullah touching the ball. But I would still start an Alexander Madison before I start a Rico Dowdle.
We have quite a bit to talk about with the Las Vegas backfield, especially with
Oh, I know.
some of
I
the
think
injuries.
I do think
Yeah, go
with
ahead.
I do think with bye weeks coming up, Dowdle would obviously be a serviceable back if you have him on your roster and you need to start somebody. You definitely throw him in there at that point if you have nobody else. Other than that, I'm not starting him with confidence on a weekly basis.
Two other names to note in the probably owned category for running back. So Jalen Warren, um, at this point now, is fully back from injury. You saw a good game in which he ended up as the running back 25. Last 2 weeks for Jalen Warren, running back 22 and running back 25. He's exceeded his value as just kind of a handcuff if he ever was one for Najee Harris. And now he's just a valuable back if you need to spot start, put him right in.
You want to
Um,
know? You want to know a quick fun fact about Jalen
sure.
Warren's the guy in front, Najee Harris? Unbelievably, he has played every single game of his NFL career. He's never been hurt. That's hard to say with, especially being a running back in the NFL, but he has never missed a game.
Yeah, he's the new DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, you were talking about running backs, but he's the new DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins had a long trend of injuries, but playing through injuries and never missing a game until same thing with like an Eli Manning. Eli Manning played every single game until he was benched by Geno Smith. So, um, yeah, no, that's definitely a good thing right there. But yeah.
I think in order to see Jalen Warren's true potential, he's going to become a free agent and probably have to go elsewhere because it looks like Najee Harris isn't going anywhere anytime soon. But he's still a great back to have for sure. I think he
Hey,
should be
knock
rostered
on
in all
wood,
leagues.
because knock on wood, you don't want him to tear his ACL next week. So, let's keep the positive trend up, without a serious injury kind of element.
Well, Anthony, you're the contract guy. You're always the one predicting moves and contracts or whatever. So uh, last year, I think it was last year, a year and a half ago, Pittsburgh did not pick up the fifth-year option for Najee Harris. He's on everybody's boards for, off-season free agent, probably going to be moving, probably going to be traded. It would take a lot for the Steelers to bring him back. Probably contract year. That's why Najee Harris is having such a good year.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, guys who want to go get that bag are actually performing well. But Jalen Warren, up to this point, has been a really good back. And even last year, everybody would have thought that Warren was the better back than Harris. What do you think the odds are that Harris comes back next year and versus Warren gets a chance to be the guy and Najee gets shipped out?
Well, I think the Steelers have a trend, especially when it comes to bringing back guys and paying them. You know what I mean? Look at the whole fiasco with Le'Veon Bell back in the day when that whole situation arose. They
But
ran him to
They didn't,
well,
though.
they ran him to the ground essentially. And then when he wanted money, he held out, and it obviously didn't work in his favor. But anyways, I could see Najee Harris going elsewhere. I could see him getting a pretty decent sized contract from a different team. What team that is,
Well,
I kind of have to go in the offseason looking at running back needed teams. But I think Pittsburgh doesn't have to give a ton of money to bring Harris back, knowing that they have Warren in their back pocket, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? You see a guy with superstar potential, who's proven to you multiple years now that he can take over that job at any moment. And
Well,
you,
I'll piggyback. I'll piggyback off that real quick though. But I think I hear what you guys are saying with that. But I think Najee Harris is not like that flashy kind of guy where he needs that big contract. I get like you want to have that big contract, but I feel like he's always been around that roster where he wants to win. He's a winning mentality kind of player. So I think there's a possibility of him playing to the point of all right, let's be more competitive on a week in week out basis and I don't need that breaking record contract. So I could see what you're saying with Jalen Warren, but like you have to cause an effect. Like you still then have to pay Jalen Warren, right? So
Well, nowhere near than,
yeah, definitely not as much. I'll tell you this right
not as
now.
much, not as much, but then let's just say Jalen Warren could be shipped out somewhere for a value, and then they could draft the Jalen Warren in the draft. So there's that
I,
possibility as well.
I'll tell you this right now. And if I was a Cowboys fan, and hopefully one day Jerry Jones listens to the show, go out and get Najee Harris. If you're the Dallas Cowboys, you need a star running back, and you have one right there. I mean, I thought that was a total whiff that they didn't even make an offer to Derrick Henry this year. Um, but if you're gonna invest some money for a starting running back, that's a perfect scenario for him.
I was looking at Anthony. I was looking at the odds recently on the betting. I think Austin, what's his Gianti? Is that how I'm pronouncing it right? The running back from oh my gosh, from not from wherever he's from in college. He's obviously the best back in the draft, and he's the highest odds is to go to Dallas. So if they think they're going to draft him, they might not necessarily go out and get a Najee, but I
Maybe,
guess
yeah.
remains to be seen. Last name in the probably owned category, ruining everybody's dreams, hopes and dreams, and loving thoughts for their pickups of Audric Estime. So Javonte Williams, if anybody dropped him, go ahead, go and pick him up. Make sure he's back on your team
But
again.
you're probably not getting him again
You
because you
probably,
dropped
you
him.
probably if you're not waiver priority, you're right. But it basically just means that I don't know what happened. I would surmise maybe he was in the doghouse for something, or I don't even believe
No,
Sean Payton when he
no.
says things like he's riding the hot hand. What do you make of
I'm gonna
that?
tell
Like,
you, Sean Payton is an absolute joke. Okay, this guy knew what he was doing. Okay, he came out with that nonsense. We're gonna give the edge to Estamine, and he had what 6 carries this week, and now he comes out and says, "Oh well, you know what? We're gonna just play it around the game plan. We don't really know what we're gonna do, but he deserves. It's a mess.
Well,
Okay,
I will say that basically he had the entire fantasy world shaken on Sunday. The entire fantasy world was going out for Audric Estime. Javonte Williams was dead to the Broncos last week. We were discussing maybe it's scheme, maybe it's how they're trying to move the ball with Bo Nix. But hey. You have a hard nosed running guy like Javonte Williams. I mean, it's going to be hard to get rid of him. But I guess he was in the doghouse again, like Billy said. Definitely pick him up if he was dropped. He is 80% owned in fantasy in ESPN, and 77% owned in Sleeper. The highest is 87% owned in Yahoo. So he is pretty much owned, but you're gonna have that one key, manager that may have dropped him. Go out and pick him up. He could be your fourth or fifth running back on your roster. So it could be a good opportunity to you know take advantage of an opportunity that really doesn't happen a lot.
I know,
Yeah,
Tommy, you and I, we had like we had a good discussion about handcuff running backs last week, which we'll touch upon today. But to piggyback on that, I think that puts Audric Estime in the valuable handcuff category for the Javante owner. Now, if to Tommy's point, if it's like your fourth or fifth running back, you're probably not rostering both Denver running backs.
Yeah.
But if you were running back starved and you had drafted Javante and now you're rocking and rolling with him as your RB2, might be worth it to have Estime on your roster as a handcuff.
yeah,
Um,
I agree with
yeah,
that. I
go
mean,
ahead.
I picked up Estime last week, and even though it didn't have a really good outing this past week, I'm not in a rush to drop him. I'm definitely going to have a wait and see type of situation. Um, I have a feeling it's going to turn into a muddied backfield where I think Sean Payton is telling the truth there when it's going to be game flow and game script.
Well, speaking of him and speaking of some other running backs, let's talk about some more widely owned guys. So if you go and look, like most of the running backs this year are pretty much staying healthy, which means that looking for spot starts on the waiver wire is really just a matter of looking at backup running backs who seem like they have standalone value. Um, that's why we had Algier going for a couple weeks, good for a spot start here or there. And maybe the two names that we could point out are probably in the same category. Let's start with Roshan, who's widely available in across all the three major platforms.
Before we talk about Roshan, I just need to
Oh,
point
sure.
this one out because you do have Isaiah Pacheco coming back from injury next week. He is healthy. There is a possibility that he was dropped. He will obviously show some projection for next week. I would definitely put in a bid for him, whether it's waiver or there are people that most likely have dropped him because they thought that he was going to be out for the rest of the season. Some managers have picked him up Sunday prior to game time, but there is an opportunity to pick him up. He is widely owned, but again, he should be 100% rostered because there could be a two-headed back element coming for the Kansas City Chiefs. But go ahead, Roshan.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so Roshan. So um, if you watch the game yesterday, he and basically for most of the year, although sometimes they switch it around, Roshan is definitely the goal line guy.
Yep.
And he's had a few games this year in which it looked like Roshan might have overtaken Swift, and then of course he made us look ridiculous, and then Swift, was great for the rest of the year. I think he's great as a spot start. If here, I'll put the question to both of
Yeah,
you guys. If you guys had to play a spot start, would you take him or the aforementioned Alexander Madison that you mentioned before?
I would take Roshan because he gets those valuable carries inside the 20. Swift, he's going to work, basically between the 20-yard lines. So he's going to work the entire field. But I think that Roshan is going to have that opportunity when, say, they're first, maybe on the 1 or 2 yard line, 5 yard line, he's going to get an opportunity to push it in. They do have a good offensive line. And I do think that, he's definitely a good spot start for a flex position if needed, especially with Bimageddon coming up this week coming up. He could be a rostered position that, 14% owned, under 15% owned universally throughout all the league, all the platforms. Definitely could be somebody that we picked up and started this week and might be able to get a touchdown out of the Minnesota defense.
I will say this, one thing I don't like about Roshan moving forward and why I would consider possibly elsewhere, maybe Madison, as Billy mentioned, is I don't like Chicago's schedule coming up. They have a gauntlet of a schedule. They have
Yeah, it's a
Minnesota twice, Detroit twice, and San Francisco in that mix, all who are very good run stopping teams.
Well, and I will say this: they're gonna have to like throw the ball, and throwing the ball and getting those penalties for pass interference on the 1 yard line. There you go. There's a punch in right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
but
I
that's
think,
that's
and you can't anticipate and hope and pray for something like that. But I'm saying like they're going to have to get the ball down the field. And when they get the ball down the field, there's going to be that opportunity to punch it in and play some hard nosed football. Or they're going to have to control the ball with those teams because they have the opportunity to move ahead of them very quickly.
How do you guys stack him up against another spot start candidate slash, I guess, handcuff, if you want to call it, Cam Akers? Cam Akers is another one who's widely available across all
Well,
league. I like Cam Akers' schedule a lot better than Roshan Johnson. How do you
I,
stack them?
I don't like Cam Akers' schedule against Chicago. I know they're going against each other. I value next for a next week play. I would take Roshan over Cam Akers, but moving forward, I'd probably take Cam Akers if needed. But we're not talking about really much buys anymore at that point. Against Arizona, against Atlanta, a little bit of a stingy defenses. Who knows who's going to show up for Arizona that day? Who knows who's going to show up for Atlanta that day? I'd probably start Cam Akers because of, Jones being on and off with injury.
You agree with that, Anthony?
yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with that. Jones, I think, or Cam Akers, sorry, has averaged double-digit carries in the last two games.
Yep.
I think this past week he had 10 carries for 25 yards, but he did reel in a touchdown off of a reception. I think he had two receptions on the day. So, I mean, if you need definitely a flex play or a buy start, these guys are moving up the board as far as startable positions if you're in a pinch.
That's what we're saying. None of these are going to be that sexy. It's going to be backup guys with some standalone value, and that's literally what we're calling out here. I mean,
Yeah.
where we were kind of making fun of the fact that Rico Suave should be must owned partially because of just the running back situation here.
He's not so suave anymore.
No, he's not. Um,
Um,
Look, I wouldn't
before
listen.
so
I
before we
wouldn't
move
be
on to the next, before
real
we move on
quick.
to the next, I just want to say, whoever is listening to this, we appreciate everything that you guys do for the community. If you guys could subscribe and make some comments, engage in our platform, so we can, if you have any questions for start sits, we'll engage with you, give you the opportunity to, make some good plays for the week. But if you could subscribe and share, that'd be really helpful for us.
Like this video. I will say though, with real quick before we move on, the whole Isaiah Pacheco situation. You guys know how much I talked about Kareem Hunt early on before he became a thing. When the Chiefs had signed him, when Pacheco went down. Listen, it's hard, but I do think that Hunt is still going to have some value in that offense. I just can't see how the Chiefs. Well, first of all, I think that they're going to ease Pacheco back in. So I do think that
I
Hunt can still
agree.
manage half of the carries at least. Um, but going forward, we'll say after we'll say week 13, I just I just can't see them throwing him to the side and being done with him. You know what I mean? Like I do
I
think that
agree.
he's going to provide some sort of, it might not be a lot, but I think it'll be enough that we could talk about possibly, a flex play or once again week 14 buys where you could be able to start him if you have them.
I I think we're, I'm not saying that it's going to be equal to, but I think it's going to be close to the Irving and White kind of category.
Yeah, I could see
Um,
that.
yeah, the Buccaneers backfield kind of category. I mean, there's going to be opportunities where they'll put both of them in the backfield. And it's going to be an option, kind of play. So I think that the Kansas City Chiefs obviously are smart with their plays as well. They're going to run the opportunities to to make it more of a positive play. If Mahomes is not playing the greatest like he hasn't been all season, they will lean closer to the run, and that's going to give more opportunities, more touches to those guys. So you can anticipate anywhere from 10 to 12 for each every single week.
Yeah, to Anthony's point, I just double checked on the bye weeks. So obviously we're calling bipocalypse, Mageddon, whatever you want to call it. This week, six teams are on bye. Anthony's 100% right. 2 weeks from now, it's another six teams
Yep.
on bye, with 13 having nothing. So especially if you're trying to make it, like if you're worried about
And
making the playoffs, you're not
right.
locked in. You have to plan for that.
That's
Yeah.
crucial. That for week 14, there's a lot of teams that are sitting right on the edge that, absolutely need to win. And sure enough, the NFL throws us six teams on a bye. It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, and like you guys just said, yeah, we're planning for this week ad drops, but you got to look ahead. If you're trying to make that playoff push, you got to make those. You got to look ahead at schedules. You got to pick up some of those players, even if some of them are on bye this week. You might be able to add them to your roster after waivers clear. Pick some of those guys up, stash them, and use them for the bye weeks. For the next two weeks to come.
Let's move on real quick, but just because you can always find in situations where there's some committee action to some degree, or you're worried, or maybe there's some injuries, you can always find gold in there for a spot start, or maybe even taking a shot on it as a flex play. So let's talk about the Vegas situation. So we mentioned Madison a few times. I don't know what his injury situation is updated for this week. I don't know. You guys maybe could check on that status, but
It's an
it's
ankle sprain.
it's an ankle sprain. I don't know how he plays with that. Any type of an ankle sprain, I think it's been like 99% the guys are out that week. I know he tried to come back in, I think. So let's say, for the sake of argument, Madison is out. Madison's out. I would rather have Amir Abdullah than Zamir White. I mean, I watched Zamir White this whole year. He's looked awful. That being said, they keep giving him options. They keep giving him opportunities. They keep giving him carries. How do you guys
Well,
see that situation playing out? Who would you rather?
they're
Well,
they're
just real
two.
quick, Tommy, Zamir White is also hurt, by the way,
Yeah,
so
he's out for
it might just be the Amir Dula show.
I mean, the thing is, they're. I mean, again, like if healthy wise, I mean, I probably would lean, towards White when it comes down to the running downs, passing downs, which they're going to be behind a lot, especially based on that schedule coming up. Um, they're going to have to compete with those, higher profile offenses. I don't really they're going to think they're going to be able to compete with Denver's defense, to be honest. So this week upcoming could be a wash, but I'd probably say with Kansas City and Tampa Bay, Amir Abdullah would probably be the better pick and play, because they're going to be playing from, passing passing the ball a lot more. They're not really going to control the ball as much. Say if Alexander Madison and Zamir White are going to be, the premier running backs, it's going to be a tough play. I think if all were healthy, I'd still stick with Alexander Madison. I'd probably go down the tier of what you're looking for, how the strategy of the game is going to be. If they're
I
playing
would
from
not
behind,
start if they're all playing. I'm not starting any of them. Like,
oh, I mean, I'm not starting any of them, but if you need a flex play and there's an opportunity for one of those, I probably would play Madison. If this week, next week, and the week after, so week 13 and 14, I probably would play Amir Abdullah because they're going to be playing the pass game a lot.
I agree. And you're right. The schedule is not exactly
It's not
good.
favor. It's not fantasy favorable. Let's just put it that way.
No, it's not. It's not favorable. Denver, KC, Tampa Bay. But again, if you're looking, especially on any of these Bimageddons or Bipocalypses, and you need a spot start, you could do way worse.
Yep.
Yeah. So before we move on, let's just, Tommy and I, we had a whole situation regarding handcuffs, and just to summarize, um, if you've got uh, get your handcuffs is the summary, especially for guys that you know who the handcuff is and you know their serious values are. Some great examples of that are Trey Benson, Ray Davis, Tyler Algier. Some bad examples of that would be whatever is going on in New Orleans. And we'll get to other guys on New Orleans as we move on with this situation. Let's move on to some wide receivers here. Um, Two quick guys to mention before we get into funny disagreements. If they are available, no question in the world, by some miracle, they're available. Go get them. Jawan Jennings, who's basically going to be the wide receiver one for the 49ers, it looks like, for the rest of the year, due to Ayuk being out for the year and Debo falling off the face of the planet. And we've got Jamison Williams, who is the wide receiver two for a team that's basically scoring 50 points a game at this point. Um, You guys agree? You guys agree with that assessment at this point?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I agree. I feel like Jamison Williams though is gonna be kind of like an MVS kind of play. It's boom or bust. I think yeah, Jamison Williams is gonna get his little undercut throws and stuff like that, but I can't feel confident in starting him every single week because they run the ball so well, and if they run a play action, it's going to St. Brown. I think when the tight end comes back and he's healthy, Laporta, I think he's the next target. You know, then you're just hoping and praying that Jameson Williams is going to get the ball deep down the field. Again, he is highly owned. He definitely is a must own, but I don't think he's a must start. On bye weeks, on heavy bye weeks, you're gonna be starting him. Again, if you're looking for a flex, you're starting Jameson Williams over Roshan Johnson,
Well,
100%.
obviously,
But
Anthony, as a Laporta owner, do you agree with what Tommy said that Laporta back healthy, he's the number two target? I mean, you were complaining about Laporta targets the whole year, right?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think he's the number two target there. I mean, Jared Goff has shown in the line, well, the Lions offense have shown they're going to spread the ball around. They're not going to be afraid to spread the ball around. They're putting up 52 points a game now. I know Amon-Ra had a great game this past weekend, but look at the weekend before. I think everyone on the offense scored, and got a touch of the football. So I won't necessarily say Laporta is the number two target. He should be. I mean, ideally, yes, he should be their number two target. I just
well,
think there's a lot of mouths to feed. They're running on all cylinders, and it's whatever we can do to win now. It's no longer,
well,
who are we going to feed.
Well, I will say this. I mean, just to piggyback off Laporta, and because we're not talking about tight ends yet, but if there is an opportunity for you to get Laporta before the trade deadline is up, I'd buy low. They do have some stingy defense matchups coming up, and honestly, I think that it's going to open up the door for Laporta to really break loose. The wide receiver game is going to be a little bit of a tighter element going against Indianapolis, Chicago, and Green Bay. Um, I think the linebacker room kind of opens up the door for Laporta for some of those little end routes. Obviously, they're going to be managing the game on the ground, but that's going to open up some little dink and duck plays to Laporta.
Let's mention a few other names in the probably owned category. So Jordan Addison, who had another good game. He's again probably owned, but it's worth checking. Ready to go. And so now let's talk about Quentin Johnston. Okay. So he's probably owned depending on whatever platform you're in. Actually, he's only 41% owned in Yahoo, 50% in ESPN, 58% in Sleeper. So I'm not going to deny that he should be owned. There's no argument here. But I think my opinion is that it's worth pumping the brakes on him. There's no question, but I just want to describe the last 2 weeks, which he's gotten a touchdown in the last 2 weeks. He only has 2 catches in both of those 2 weeks. Obviously, it's being propped up by touchdowns. You would like him to have more catches. One of the games, I think he had more targets, significantly more targets than the other game. Am I right to be pumping the brakes on Quentin Johnston here, or am I just being too cautious and, let's ready to rumble with, the LA Chargers in general?
Well,
What do you guys think?
well, I will put it this way. If you're looking at 2 weeks, that's one thing. But if you look from week 9 to 11, so that's 3 weeks, he's been targeted 15 times, 8 receptions, 190 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So, and he's the wide receiver 7 in half point PPR setting. So I think last week I was very against him, but for him to put up those numbers again, I think that he's doing what we've discussed last week and prior weeks. Herbert is a great quarterback when given the opportunity. Quentin Johnson is getting the opportunity to thrive in the offense. And yes, did he only have 2 receptions? But again, he's getting the targets. Tennessee again was a stingy wide receiver defense. I will give that to them now. After a little bit more breakdown, but in all reality, Herbert's throwing the ball. They are managing the ball on the ground, but he's getting those play action opportunities, which is opening the field for a speedy guy like him.
Maybe you're right. I mean, you kind of halfway convinced me. Maybe I'm being a little bit too cautious about that, but I think I really do. The Chargers went with, I think they won like 4 in a row. I mean, they're rolling, having thrown the ball more than the amount that they were before. So
I will, I
I
will,
think I think
I
you
will
convinced
say
me. Yeah,
this.
go
I
ahead.
will say this to your point. There's only one pass catcher on the Chargers right now who I'd want rostered on my team, and his name is not Quentin Johnston, and we're going to get to that in a little bit.
Oh, all right.
Does he wear a cowboy hat?
Yeah. All right, we'll get to him in a second. So let's talk about other guys. So, Mr. Anthony Perez, after hearing that lovely dissertation on the Cleveland Browns, have I made you a believer on Jerry Jeudy, or are you still only Cedric Tillman, or is there anybody else you'd like to mention about that?
Well, I'm actually going to be on your side with this one. We're going to be in agreement. And I said this a couple of weeks back when uh
We have a
Jameis
change,
Winston.
ladies and gentlemen. I like
Yeah,
it.
a little change of heart here. Well, remember I raved about Winston when he was named the starter and how that was going to boast Tillman's fantasy value because, as we know, Winston likes to sling the rock. The only issue with Winston is can he keep those turnovers to a minimum? Because we know that he's good for at least 3 interceptions a game a lot of the times. But in the past 3 games since Winston's been the starter, Cedric Tillman has ran 134 routes, Jerry Jeudy 135, Elijah Moore 115. All combined, Tillman has 27 targets in those 3 games, Jeudy 29, Elijah Moore 28. The air yards, this is where things get interesting now. For each receiver, for Tillman is 386 air yards, Jerry Jeudy 369, for Elijah Moore 379. That means they're getting targeted in a mass amount. It's no 5 yard here, 10 yards here. No, they're getting targeted down the field. This is beautiful. This is what you want to see. And their first retargets, believe it or not, are all even. Cedric Tillman with 25, Jerry Jeudy with 27, and Elijah Moore 24 for first retarget share. In that span, Tillman has 16 receptions, 221 yards. Jerry Jeudy 18 for 294. Elijah Moore 17 for 179. It's just going to keep getting better. I understand the matchups that they have coming up are very, very tough, but you got to understand the run game is non-existent right now in Cleveland as Nick Chubb is working his way back into his old form, which has yet to be seen. But because the matchups are so tough, they're going to be playing down by a lot most of the time. And what's going to happen? They're going to have to throw the ball, and they're going to continue to throw the ball. And I think Jameis Winston is continue to throw 40 plus times a game, and
Do
someone's got to catch those passes. What's up
do you remember the 30 for 30 season?
for Jameis Winston?
Yes.
Oh yeah, it was miraculous.
All right, but I will tell you this right now. It would probably be like, say, like, based on averages, it's probably going to be like 2 touchdowns for 10 interceptions for the next 3 weeks.
It's listen, Tommy, it's possible, but with these kind of numbers, e- all 3 of these guys are startable. All 3 of them.
And this is MVS fool's gold, I
No,
feel.
no,
Oh,
no.
get me
And I,
started.
I will continue to say this. These guys are all startable at this point. Okay. I know the matchup is tough, especially with bye weeks coming up. With week 12 and week 14, we're getting 6 teams each. If you need a flex play, you need a wide receiver like myself. I have Jamar Chase, who's on a bye this week. I'm gonna miss him like crazy, but I'm gonna have to start Cedric Tillman in his place and start him with confidence.
All right, well, let's put it this way. Would you say if you had the option on you had these two rostered already? You have Quentin Johnson and you have Cedric Tillman, who you're starting next week.
I'm still rolling the dice with Tillman just
I,
because just
I, I
because
would go Johnston.
I,
just
I would go with
because
Johnson against Baltimore's defense, man. I mean,
I
Baltimore,
get it,
Atlanta,
I get
Kansas
it,
City.
but I the volume is just too much for me to ignore.
I mean, the volume is, as we discussed, the volume's there for Quentin Johnson as well.
Nah, not as much as another receiver I know there, but
Yes. Anthony, I'll split the difference between you and Tommy. I think that Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, despite the bad matchups coming up, you're right. You can't ignore these psychotically crazy
Yeah,
numbers from
you
Jameis.
you you yeah, you can't ignore it. You gotta pick them up. But again, like you're saying, you're only gonna plug and play if you need to.
Right. But I'll just mention I so do not count Elijah Moore into that category of any of that. But
it's hard because I don't want to either. But like I said, and it's like I said with Tillman a while back, you can't. And one of the things I preached about Cedric Tillman was not so much even when Winston came into the picture, it was the amount of targets he was getting a game, which were about 12 in the beginning. You can't shy away from that. You see what I'm
And
saying? It's just go ahead.
Elijah Moore is a poor man's Sterling Shepard, and that's poor.
yeah. Well,
But the thing about Jerry Jeudy, and then I can't even believe I'm going to say this, Billy. I just can't. but we're not seeing Denver Broncos Jerry Judy. We're seeing Alabama Jerry Judy right now. We're seeing the reason why
Uh,
he got drafted into
don't
the
you start.
NFL. No, this is a shell of his former self that what he's doing right now. He looks great. He does. I have to give him credit. He looks great.
He does no, he does look good. There's no way around it. The only issue, honestly, with both of them is that they're in the kind of probably owned category, basically 50, 60% across the board. So let's move to some guys who are much more available. So let's start with I'll take my victory lap on Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I don't want to hear the word fool's gold, the phrase fool's gold on them. Obviously, they're on a bye this week, so you're not really going to get much from him this week. So don't play him. But going forward, next two matchups out the bye, Rams and Giants. Mr. Lang, do you have a problem with this assessment?
I mean, he's gonna do it against the Rams.
I can't bring himself to say.
He needs a three-peat. He needs a three-peat before I can actually feel confident in something like that. I mean, again, with the buys, yeah, but like now let's talk about post buys. Let's talk about, playoffs. Are you rolling dice with MBS in the first round of the playoffs if you're playing?
If none of those other receivers come back,
Are you playing him over Cedric Tillman?
uh, in what matchup during the
Uh,
playoff?
it, well, we're talking about playoffs now. We're not talking, say if you're picking them up and you utilize them as a stash play because you're not utilizing MBS. I really hope you're not utilizing MBS, just like you're not utilizing Christian Watson or Romeo Dobbs next week as a play. Well, not next week for MBS, but I really hope you're not like banking on starting one of those guys next week as a play.
No, but
Um,
to your point, I know that the Browns schedule opens up after this, horrific 3 or 4 games. So I would probably go, Brown situation. Again, provided Jameis is still starting at that point. That's another issue. But
Let me
yeah, I
ask you a
mean,
quick question, Tommy. So when Rashid Shaheed was healthy on the Saints, what kind of numbers was he putting up? If
well, so
off your brain.
we talked about this last week. So basically, Rashid Shaheed basically was a top 10 wide receiver in his weeks of healthiness throughout the NFL. I don't believe that MVS is the same player. Now, MVS has had a lot of starstruck moments on multiple different rosters, especially with Aaron Rodgers in his prime. Um, but I really think that MVS is not Rashid Shaheed. Um, he's going to get 3 targets like he has been the past 2 weeks, and it's a boomer bust. If he catches it, great. If he doesn't catch it, because that's what shipped him off the Kansas City Chiefs, not catching balls. So I think I don't know. I mean, I like Rashid Shaheed better because he's younger, he's flashier. MVS,
Well,
he's not as consistent.
my point is he's not Shaheed. He's not, and I agree with you there. But he is playing the Shaheed role right now. That's his role.
Yeah,
That's what MVS is doing. And I think you make a great point. And Billy might disagree here, but it is definitely a boomer bust situation. It's either he's going to get you 3 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown, or he's going to give you the potential to put up a zero.
again, I'm not saying don't pick him up. If there's an opportunity to pick him up this week, it might be easier because you might be able to pick him up as an ad after the waivers clear and just stash him. But I'm not feeling confident in starting him the following weeks, even though he has some decent matchups. Like against the Giants, I think that's a Kamara week. Against the Rams, I think honestly that could go back to a Taysom Hill week. Taysom Hill is getting targets.
yeah,
He's
we'll talk
now.
about him.
I know we're going to talk about him, but again, we're talking about the passing element of that roster. A Swiss Army knife is going to get more opportunities than MVS. If MVS is only getting 3 targets, listen, if he gets 3 targets against Los Angeles Rams and he gets 1 touchdown for 100, basically 180 yard, 3 catches for 180, 102 yards and a touchdown. All right, well, I'll go with him again because this is not fool's gold anymore because he did it 3 weeks straight with scoring touchdowns. But if you're just waiting on that boomer bust play every single week, it's just not going to happen every single week, and that's something that I can't bank on. Roster him, but don't feel confident in starting him.
He's probably a good name to use as a barometer for some other names we could bring up in the wide receivers because MVS is really widely available across any one of these platforms. So let's match him up against. And remember, you can't even play MVS this week to keep it in mind. So let's marry him up against some of these other names. So uh, I guess we could bring up the amorphous situation of the Carolina Panthers. You got Xavier Legette, who's about 40% owned, Adam Thielen, 25% owned, who coming back from the IR. I know Anthony likes him. And then the rookie Jalen Coker. In my opinion, I think whatever was going on at the beginning of last year with Adam Thielen and Bryce Young, trying to chase that is not a good idea. I don't think that's going to continue. Adam Thielen's like 38,000 years old at this point, and it's not like the Panthers all of a sudden are a great offense.
No,
Um,
no, I don't. I don't think they're a great offense, but I do feel he has more confidence in an elderly receiver to be throwing the ball to. He's more of a little dink and dunk opportunity. He's going to flash down the field kind of player of Adam Thielen. I think he has more value than a Jalen Coker. I think is Xavier Legette is the primary target on that roster when it comes down to the passing game.
I
And
think he's the only one that should be rostered. I really do. I can't see any value.
I mean, honestly, if we're really feeling high on MVS, then you got to feel better about Adam Thielen coming back. This might be his last year as a receiver. I honestly think that if he's coming back to play, he's coming back to play for his legacy, and that's going to give him an opportunity to score fantasy football points.
Maybe it's hard for me to.
I mean, what else? What other reason are you coming back to play for the Carolina Panthers in your 74th season?
But what legacy? You're not going to win the Super Bowl with the Panthers.
Oh no, I'm talking about legacy. His statistical legacy. I mean, why wouldn't he just say I'm done? He's coming back after being hurt again. He's gonna command targets. He's gonna command targets. He's gonna get the ball. Even if he starts this week only getting 4 or 5 targets, that's 4 or 5 targets is taken away from Jalen Coker and the rest of the roster. So, they're going to be throwing the ball against Kansas City. They're going to be throwing the ball against Tampa Bay. They're going to be throwing the ball against Philadelphia. They're going to be throwing the ball every single week. They cannot control the ball against those teams.
Going forward, I would rather maybe Tom, maybe you disagree, but I'd rather have MVS than Adam Thielen. Leggett, I think I'd rather have just because he's the guy. He's now again, how much is the guy worth in Carolina? That's a separate question. Carolina's next 3 matchups: home versus Kansas City, home versus Tampa Bay, at Philadelphia. Not the best. It's worth keeping in mind.
Again, but they are passing opportunities. They're going to be playing from behind. They're not going to control the ball on the ground. They're going to have to throw the ball. Adam Thielen is going to command targets.
Let's jump to some more widely owned guys, widely available guys. So Juju, he's basically available in just about every single platform. Couple stats I want to point out. Before the injury, the game that he blew up and he went 7 for 130 and a touchdown. It was the first game he was back 100%. This past game, it was the first game he was back and he only played 36% of the snaps. So it's not like he was back the whole time and then just Mahomes didn't look for him. I think the Hopkins situation is good for Juju. It gives him a chance to go in his kind of Rashee Rice kind of slot, do your little post-in route type of thing. Considering that they realize that it's going to fall on the back of Mahomes to win now at this stage of the year, and they're going to be fighting all the way up until the end for the number 1 seed with the Bills. I think Juju's a good pickup. You guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think he's a good pickup, but I would say the next guy on our list is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. I think I would pick him up over Juju
Really?
at 1.6% owned. And it's because he has had 15 targets for 10 receptions and 2 touchdowns in the past 3 weeks. And, if you're looking for opportunity and you're looking for consistency, that's more consistent play than I think that you're going to find with a Kansas City Chief wide receiver.
Anthony, why don't you rank those 3 pickups for me? MVS, Juju, and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine.
I'd probably put MVS top. I would go Westbrook-Ikhine 2, Juju
Really?
3. Yeah, only
Mhm.
because Westbrook Akine actually he's got more touchdowns in the last five. I think he has 5 or 6 touchdowns in his last 5 games, believe it or not. But the problem with Westbrook Akine is he is along the lines of MVS, where he's going to catch the ball. It's one catch for 80 yards and a touchdown.
Westbrook,
So
yeah, Westbrook was 4 touchdowns. He's in the past 5 weeks, he's wide receiver 17.
yeah. So, but he's the same thing, 2 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown. So he's very big play dependent, but that you can't ignore the touchdowns in the last 6 weeks.
Yep.
He's pretty much gotten one every single game.
Yep. I will
Um,
uh I will say this again. We appreciate our everybody watching this video. If you guys could subscribe, comment on the video, ask your start sit questions. We'll get to them, and we appreciate you guys if you guys could share. But again, if you could subscribe, if you're enjoying this video, we will be continuing to drop videos every Tuesday.
so before we quickly move on to tight ends, just wanted to quickly mention some other probably owned names. So the Green Bay wide receiver situation, we got Watson and Dobbs all about 40, 50, 60% in various platforms. Um, I'm afraid, I think it's going to be Watson. I'm afraid to chase the good game, chasing any of the Green Bay receivers having a good game. I know that last week I was all up on Tommy's assessment that Tucker Kraft was the guy, but it's amazing how fickle we are. I basically changed my opinion in 1 week because it's not like he killed it before that. Maybe Tucker Kraft is going to have another great game. Maybe this is just every Green Bay pass catcher. This is how it's going to be: inconsistent, really good 1 week, really bad another week. Do you guys see it that way, or do you see it being like, okay, Jaden Reed, and then it's legitimately Christian Watson after that? How do you guys see that?
I feel comfortable right now. If I had to own a receiver out of that Green Bay receiving corps, it'd probably be Jalen Reed would be the one guy that I'd want.
Yeah, but I'd
Well,
still be scared.
Yeah, but you know what? He's probably the most consistent one out of the bunch. I think Jordan Love, favors him a little bit. Watson has had a couple of good games as of late, but like Billy said, I really it's up to you if you want to chase it. But I will say Jordan Love is now officially healthy. He's off the injury report for good. He looked good this past weekend. And they're going to continue to throw the ball. I feel more confident in being a Jalen Reed owner than I would Christian Watson.
Yeah, I mean,
um,
honestly,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm a little nervous, trying to start one of those guys. I mean, there's not one player in the past 3 weeks, as 3 weeks as a whole, that's in the top 24 as a wide receiver. So it's kind of like fool's gold. Like you're hoping and praying for a touchdown every week. You got 1 through 24. The 24 is in from week 9 to 11 is George Pickens. Inside that, basically, you got nobody from Green Bay. Um, it's tough. I mean, number 44, actually not number 44. Sorry, um, Christian Watson's number 36. Um, you got your boy over there, Jaden Reed's number 41. So I mean, it's tough. It's tough to play that, like especially like every single week. Yeah, or some of them getting the targets, but they're not making these big plays that's giving you the fantasy football numbers you need. So it's really difficult. It's the same thing, obviously, like this week. Um, Kraft put up a donut. He put 0 points. They're playing football to win games. They're playing football sometimes to control the ball on the ground, depending on their strategy and who they're playing. So, I mean, I'd be a little nervous about, starting one of those guys. Yeah, if you have to, yeah, I'd probably start the one I'd probably start is probably Christian Watson. But uh,
You're talking
again,
about starting Christian Watson as like, oh, but okay, Jaden Reed, and then if you got to start a second guy, Christian Watson, or are you really using this as an opportunity to criticize Jaden Reed here?
I'm criticizing Jaden Reed. I just don't believe that he is the player. He's the wide receiver one. I mean, yes, he's
Jaden
commanding
Reed,
target.
the Jaden Reed in half point PPR, the number 9 wide receiver.
He's not consistent every single week.
Right, but no wide receiver is. I mean, it's not. I mean, we're not talking about
No, there are
Justin
wide receivers
Jefferson
that
here.
are, but there are
Well,
wide receivers that are. But if you're gonna name yourself the number one yes, he's the number one wide receiver on the team. But I
right,
would
that's
not
all I'm
feel
saying.
I would not feel confident in starting him every single week because you don't know what's going to happen. It's either boom or bust.
I would feel confident starting him as a uh, fairly high floor boomer bust wide receiver two. You're right. I'm saying he's the wide receiver one for the Packers. Put it this way, I'd be happy starting Jaden Reed over any other Packers pass catcher. I'm not saying that, don't worry about the inconsistency. I agree with that, but you can't ignore to lump him in the same category as the inconsistency of like Christian Watson, for example, on the same team. Um, but I agree with you. Put up with whatever inconsistency you can. There's one more name I didn't quite mention because I imagine it'll come up when we talk about the New York Giants. So I'll put a pause on that because we're gonna probably have a whole thing about the New York Giants coming up. So let's move on to some tight ends here. Let's get through some probably owned. These two names have aggravated me and Anthony to.
By the way,
to
I don't think there's anything to talk about the New York Giants. I think it doesn't matter with Daniel Jones.
We will get to it. So two quick
No
names.
reason.
Two quick names to mention that have been aggravating me and Anthony about why they continue to be available every single week. Hunter Henry and Zach Ertz. They keep proving it. They keep doing it. They're integral parts to the offense. It is what it is. Make the moves and pick them up, especially if you need it this week, especially.
Yeah, Hunter Henry
Yeah.
is by far Drake May's favorite target right now. And I don't know if you saw it the other day with the offensive coordinator for the Patriots came out and said, and was actually encouraging, saying that they are drawing up as many plays as they can for Hunter Henry, especially when it comes to the red zone. A lot of their pass plays are designed for Hunter Henry. So that's another
Good.
positive note and another reason why you should go pick him up.
And the other two names we'll mention are the ones that basically won you your week this past week. Jonnu Smith, who's kind of owned, depending on where you are, but if he's available, go for it. And then we could probably have a 2-second conversation about Taysom Hill. Maybe the best tight end performance, quote unquote, tight end performance of all time. I was looking at some of the stats on that. It's right up there. He's available in about half of leagues. In my opinion, well, obviously he's not scoring 50 points every week. That goes without saying. But in my opinion, is he worth it as hey, don't even think about it. Just put him in there. He's worth whatever ups and downs they are. That's probably true for the rest of the year, considering how down the Saints are. But he is, having played Taysom Hill in various years in various formats, he's just as likely to give you 3 points as he is to give you 20 or 30 points. You guys agree about the Taysom Hill?
Yeah, I mean, again, you're not starting him with confidence, but you're starting him with the opportunity to have a 20-point game because he's throwing the ball, he's catching the ball, and he's running the ball. So 3 touchdowns this past week with, I think, was it 10 for 12 in receptions? Sorry, 12 for 10 in receptions.
Such a crazy stat line.
So he had a tremendous week, and I will say, like, so the targets are first target goes to Kamara when it comes down to the passing game right now. Kamara, Taysom Hill, and then it's whoever's open down the field. And I really think that there is tremendous value, especially in some leagues that you get those extra bonus 0.5 point for tight ends. There's a lot of opportunity for him to have so much value down the road. They are going into their bye this week, but he's definitely somebody that you could spot start in a flex position if needed. I feel like he's a higher valued or different kind of value of a tight end because he has multiple roles. Again, we talked about his Swiss Army knife. Let's put it this way, Anthony, on a positive week where there's no buys, so we'll talk about week 13. Do you start Taysom Hill against Los Angeles Rams, or do you start Will Dissly against at Atlanta?
Will Dissly.
And so I agree with that. And the reason why I agree with that is because Will Dissly they're going to be commanding more targets by throwing the ball here, dink and dunks. I think that Los Angeles, they're going to be able to command the ball on the ground. But as a tight end aspect. But as a running back aspect, you can look at it as Taysom Hill could vulture a touchdown or two as well. So I hear what you're saying with Will Disley because of the play of Herbert, but there is the possibility to spot start a tight end. Say if you were able to pick up Will Disley and also Taysom Hill, you'd be able to have both those guys. Somebody could play your flex, somebody could play your tight end. You're going to have a nice week.
Well, you brought up Will Disley there, so let's jump into
Let's
let's jump into the more widely available. So just give me 2 seconds to say my piece, and then I'll let you guys completely call me
actually before you
whatever
get to
names you
that though,
want. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I do want to ask you a question because you're a Camaro owner. How
Yes.
frustrated did you get watching Taysom Hill get all those touchdowns? Do you feel a certain type of way? Because listen, the only reason I ask is I've been a Camaro owner before, and this is when Taysom Hill was emerging, and he would just literally steal every touchdown on the goal line, and it would just frustrate me to no end because Camaro would go off for 100 and something yards with no touchdowns.
I was pretty frustrated, although watching the game, I think Taysom had 2 or 3 touchdowns from like 50 or 60 yards out.
Yeah.
So it's not like it was a goal line one. Those are the most frustrating. But honestly, considering how amazing Kamara has been throughout the year, and like I'll take it. And I didn't actually get a chance to mention it. My other issue with the Taysom Hill situation is that I think this is also a function of no other options. So right, Olave's out, Rashid Shaheed is out. The guy Bub Means he was out. Kendra, but let's say they're about to have their bye now. Coming out of their bye, people are going to be getting it. Bub Means is going to be returning. Kendra Miller is coming back from IR, and I think Kendra Miller is the biggest um, stop there to whatever Taysom Hill has been returned. Because then otherwise, how? Because and by the way, Jamal Williams was out too. So what spelling was there for Alvin Kamara this past week? Of course, Taysom Hill was going to be great. I actually my frustration, honestly, Anthony, was that I didn't pick him up, and then
Hmm.
I thought, well, it's not worth it picking him up before the bye. Maybe he'll get 10 points, whatever. But how wrong I was. Um, but Tommy mentioned Will Disley there, so give me 2 seconds to just say this, and then you guys can tell me how wrong I am. So he has had 2 weeks this whole season that you were glad that you started him. 2 whole weeks. And now we're talking about the Chargers. Granted, we're talking about the Chargers offense in a more positive way in which they're passing the ball more. And we're all over Quentin Johnston. I know maybe you less so you, Anthony, but obviously Ladidi Mekonke. And obviously Justin Herbert, we're very high on him as well. You had, again, 2 weeks of the whole season that you started him. Let me erase how my feelings are about Will Disley the past however many umpteen years. You guys convinced me why he's a great tight end.
So remember when I brought him up a couple weeks ago? Once again, you guys laughed at the notion, and you gave me your reasons why, and they were all valid reasons. I understand why you felt that way. I'm more so of like, I like to look at the bigger picture of things, right? And number one, the offensive coordinator on the Chargers, I believe, is Greg Roman. If I'm wrong, let me know.
Yes.
So Greg Roman, who was he with formerly?
The
The
Ravens.
the Ravens. And guess who made Mark Andrews who he was when he was there? Greg Roman. Greg
Okay.
Roman loves the tight end. Okay, that's number one. It's true. He does. So Will Disley in his last 5 games. So this is pretty much when I brought him up, we'll say, just
Sure.
maybe a week after. He leads the team with 33 targets in that span.
Yep.
Okay. Uh,
I just actually put that down. I was going to counter with that and let you know, Billy, that he has 33 targets.
yeah. He
And targets are gold.
Yeah,
This is fair.
and I've said that since Cedric Tillman. Targets are king, and they will remain king. Not only that, do you know who he's tied with on top of the leaderboard for receptions?
Oh, this ought to be good. Tell me.
Lad McConkey, which they both have 24 receptions. They both lead the team in that 5 game span for receptions.
Right.
Disley's target shares over the last 5 weeks 29.7%, 23.3%, 11.5%. So he had a down week, then shot up to 33.3%, and then 18.2% this past week. And he caught his touchdown. He went 4 for 80 with a touchdown. At this
This
point,
This
You
is
got to pick
fair.
him
I
up.
guess.
You
And
got to.
now they're throwing the ball more. So those three targets week 1 through 4 before the bye, they start throwing the ball, week 7 on. It's only going to get better.
And here's the thing. Remember when Chargers went out and signed Hayden Hurst, right? Everyone thought he was going to be the guy that was going to lead the Charger tight end scene, could have a potentially big year. He doesn't even play. He was inactive this week, okay? Will Disley has literally taken over that job. And he ran 22 routes this past week.
That
Listen,
part that part is fine. I mean, if we look at the stat line that you guys are going back to, which was 5 weeks ago at Arizona, so that's the game that he blew up in, 8 for 81, and he ends up with 12.1 fantasy points. My point is the next three fantasy games: 5 for 41, no touchdowns; 2 for 9, no touchdowns; 5 for 30, no touchdowns. I'm saying obviously, and given the tight end landscape, it's not like it's not like you're losing that much, but to go out of your way to be like, this is the guy. Now, again, he had this great, won't deny it, great game, 4 for 80 and a touchdown this past week. It's hard. And everything that you guys are saying is valid too. How about this? If he has a great game, which by the way, the matchup is amazing too. He's home versus Baltimore. If he has a great game in that one, and a game where he's supposed to, where we're talking him up against a bad pass defense, if he does it when he's supposed to, I'll become a believer.
so his next 4 games are the Ravens, Falcons, Chiefs, Bucks. All 4 have allowed top 10 fantasy points to tight ends. You're right. This is where he's supposed to perform. Let's see if he's going to perform. I have a feeling he is. I have a feeling he's going to continue to get the looks. I have a feeling he's going to get the receptions. And, in case of our league, since we're in a tight end premium league, he becomes even more valuable because of the 1.5 per reception. You turn that, the 5 to 30, or look at today, the 4 this week, the 4 for 80 and a touchdown. That's over a 20-point day in our league, easily.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll find
The
out.
last one I just want to kind of point out real quick is Luke Schoonmaker. If Jake Ferguson is going to be out with the concussion, which we all know that there's a possibility of him being out based on the concussion rules these days. This week he basically had 10 targets for 6 receptions, 56 yards. There's an opportunity for him to basically get the same target share based on the play that they're having at quarterback. Little dink and dunks. Again, if you're in a position where you have the extra point per reception for tight ends, that's going to give you a nice startable asset right there.
And he's super.
And
He's literally available everywhere.
let me
Yep.
ask you a quick question. So, say you're a Ferguson owner and you lost Ferguson. Who do you pick up and start? Will Disley, if he's available. It's a no-brainer.
There we go.
Now, here's another one though. Look at the performances recently, like Mark Andrews, for example. Is Disley? Would you consider him starting over Mark Andrews, given his current trend and what he's been doing the last few weeks? We'll look at it like that.
Well,
What do
I
you think?
mean, Isaiah Likely is still, out there and available as well. So there's an opportunity to pick up the same player that's on a high profile offense, just like, Andrews is. So, I mean, again, I think it's kind of a flip of a coin, but who's going to be playing, who's going to be receiving those catches in the backfield. I mean, I don't really think that they've had multiple weeks where both of them had good weeks. So between Andrews and Isaiah Likely. So, I mean, I probably would lean right now based on the target share, Will Disley than any of them, because you're really depending on Andrews to score a touchdown or likely to score a touchdown right now.
Um, one other quick name I want to mention, then we'll move on to our last segment. And I want to get Tommy's opinion on this. So, Daniel Jones has been sat for the rest of the year. It'll be
Benched.
has been
Finally.
has been benched for the rest of the year. It's going to be Mr. Tommy Cutlets, Tommy DeVito, Tommy Godfather, whatever you want to call him. So before this week, and there's a name I didn't bring up in the wide receivers purposely, so I could just quickly have Tommy weigh in on this. So if it was going to be Daniel Jones or perhaps even Drew Lock for the rest of the year, I would have said that Wan'Dale Robinson was going to be a great pickup. He's in the probably owned category. Having moved to Tommy DeVito, I think that basically falls to the wayside personally. And I think that actually makes Theo Johnson, who has been doing pretty well, into a really great pickup. He is available just about everywhere. Do you see it like that? Or am I overcompensating for the DeVito move?
Well, I mean, DeVito last year, I mean, they didn't really let him throw the ball as much as in the beginning of his like he started down the wire like as the season went on they allowed him to throw the ball more. It was more runs, but like in the beginning. But I mean, it just depends on what the coaching is going to be able was going to allow him to do. So I mean, I think the most value asset is the tight end position. Right there, I think they're going to try to force the ball to Malik Neighbors. I think right now Wandell is kind of like that odd man out kind of thing, because he's not a down the field flyer. Um, yeah, I think Theo Johnson is kind of going to be the second target, which is not saying a lot for that
No,
offense
it's
right now.
no, it's not. To me, he looked like he had a lot of promise, and I
No,
don't
he does. He does. I wouldn't trust picking any of those players up right now.
wait and see.
Uh, just wait and see. I mean, there's no rush to go pick them up. There's no reason. There's better players that are startable assets or flexible assets if needed within these bye weeks that you can really flex some of these tight ends as well.
I agree, and we mentioned a whole bunch of tight end options. So, ready to move to the last segment?
Yep.
All right. So, for quarterbacks and defenses, quick little prelude, and then we're going to play a little game here. So, um, because of the nature of quarterbacks and defenses, so many people are streaming them, and the way that the supply and demand is, it coincides with us being as judicious as possible about giving people good names to choose of guys who are widely available. So, for example, there's a bunch of quarterbacks that we could talk about, like Matt Stafford, Bo Nix, Justin Herbert, Geno Smith, Russell Wilson, who are definitely probably owned slash very, very much owned 50, 60, 70% across the various different platforms. So, the sake of keeping this as streamlined and easy for our listeners as possible, we're going to point out some names that are not so widely owned if you're plugging in and putting them into your lineup. So, and we're going to apply the same thing for defenses. So, as best as we can tell, the best three quarterbacks available is Anthony Richard. That's how bad things have gotten on Bipocalypse, by the way. We've got Anthony Richardson, Drake May, and Jameis Winston. And for the defenses, we've got the Bears, the Buccaneers, and the Commanders. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a snake style draft. We all have to have one quarterback and one defense. And we have to use those 6 names to support our little draft. And we'll see who ended up with more points at the end of this week. So why don't we go Tommy, Anthony, me, and then snake style back, me, Anthony, Tommy. So, Mr. Lang, who will be your first pick? And feel free to mention.
Can I start with the defense first?
Sure.
All right, I'll take the Commanders.
So the Commanders widely available. Next 2 matchups: home versus Dallas, home versus Tennessee. Not a bad pick. What about you, Mr. Perez?
My defense is going to be the Buccaneers. That's an easy one. They're going against the Giants. Tommy DeVito's back in. I think that defense is going to feast.
Another one about basically available everywhere. And their matchups after that: at Carolina, home versus Vegas.
I will make a quick notion, though, in all seriousness, game aside. They say defense wins championships. If you have the room on your roster, pick up the Buccaneers and you could ride them the rest of the way because their schedule is, like Billy said, Carolina, they have Las Vegas. They have a Chargers matchup, which is tough, but then week 16 and 17, they have Dallas and Carolina again. It does not get better than that.
Well, since you guys picked up the 2 defense, well, I'm back to back, so I can't even play the game. So I'll take the Bears. So it's worth pointing out. So the Bears are a bit more owned, but about 40% across platforms.
You might get minus points this week.
They're home versus Minnesota.
They're going to get minus points this week.
I disagree. I think they're a great defense. They shut down the Packers for the most part. Minnesota has not been looking as good. I think I might start to not be eating so much Carl and Darnold. We'll see, but that's fine. They are got some bad matchups coming after. But for this one, in terms of widely available, the Bears I think are just fine. So I get my pick of the litter with quarterbacks, and despite as good as we feel about the Cleveland situation, I will not be taking Jameis here. I'll be taking Drake May at Miami. He's been looking good. The Miami defense is pretty good, but they don't scare me. I'll go with Drake May.
My pick's gonna have to be that was who I was gonna go with. I had a feeling
There we go.
I had a feeling it wasn't gonna be there on the turnaround, but I'm gonna have to go Anthony Richardson. I think those 2 weeks treated him well. I think he needed that reset. He came out. I mean, listen, the Jets can make anyone look like a superstar at this point. So I won't. I'm gonna need to see him in another game. But he looked great. He looked efficient. He was throwing the ball down the field. I know there were a lot of concerns with, how was Josh Downs going to do and the receivers? They did fine. But also he adds that rushing element too, and he can provide a couple rushing touchdowns for you. So I'm going to roll with him.
All right, and I guess I'm taking Jameis Winston. The positive thing about all this stuff is he's going to have to find a way to throw the ball. So, get those air yards as we were talking about. He's definitely not the player that I want, but I'm going to roll with him, and I'm going to plug him in there with confidence.
You might have to reverse the stat line of his 10 interceptions and 2 touchdowns. Flip-flop him.
I wanted to say this real quick. So my start of the week for defense is not fully. They're not widely owned in multiple platforms. The only one, which is I still don't understand, is 93% in Yahoo, which is insane to me. Y'all must be keeping like 4 or 5 defenses on your teams. But the Kansas City Chiefs, their matchup against Carolina, Las Vegas, and then they have Los Angeles Chargers. Which is the divisional game. I don't see fireworks happen in that game. It could be a low scoring game, defensive opportunity. So they're a really good start for the next 3 weeks. And I'm gonna say this. And my start of the week. Basically, if you need a plug-in for the next couple weeks, or you want a streamer for the next couple weeks, put in your boy Matty Stafford. Matt Stafford he's going against the Philadelphia Eagles this week. So it's a tough matchup, but it is home. Then he goes against New Orleans, who lost a lot of backs in their passing defense, and then Buffalo, they're going to have to be throwing the ball. With Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp and all that talent around him, there's no reason for him not to be successful. He should definitely be opened and owned by as a streamer quarterback.
It's funny that you bring him up. I think it's funny the 3 guys whom we drafted from. I think I'm so scared of the Philadelphia defense. As great as Matt Stafford is and the weapons he got, and I agree with everything that you said, they're going to have to throw in everything. But this week, I just think they're going to get slaughtered. But we'll find out. We'll
see.
Yeah.
When you get slaughtered defensively, what's going to happen? You're going to throw that ball. So let's go.
All right. So we'll find out how the scores shape up. So that about wraps it up. Anything else we want to mention real quick?
I just want to mention, unless Anthony, you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
I just want to again, I know I said it a couple times, but if you guys could like, subscribe, share with your family. If you don't, this is not something that you guys enjoy doing, but you wanted to listen to us have a conversation and really just go back and forth with one another and learn about fantasy football. It's great. Those of you that listen to this and basically do fantasy football, awesome. Share with your friends, your family. We really appreciate the support. And, again, drop some comments in there on start sits, questions, give us, half point PPR, what your position in playing in, and we'll help you. So drop some comments, please share, please subscribe. We really help, our movement with this community.
Agreed. Thank you very much, everybody.
Hope you guys have a great night. Will Disley, go get him.
Yeah.